In some African countries, singers are storytellers. They tell of tribal battles and harvests and great hunters. Young people listen because this is their school. They learn what they need to know to pass the test of growing up. For boys, the first test is the hunt, to prove that they can help provide food for the tribe. "13-year-old TK is ready. He knows he can shoot well, but he also knows the rules of the test. He has a specifically marked arrow, and once it hits a beast, he must go at once to his father so the tribes can verify the kill. TK spots the herd, picks his target. He shoots. The arrow hits and the wounded beast races away from the herd. TK must not follow, only watch to see where it goes. He's not sure it's a kill. But he must tell his father, an important part of the test. The tribe's most skillful tracker leads TK and his father over the ground where TK last saw the animal. They find hoof prints, broken twigs, more hoof prints, but no dead beast. And maybe his shot only frightened the animal and it got away. If so, he failed his test. But they find it, killed by TK's marked arrow. TK has proven he can hunt, but he can't join the others in eating the meat he provided. He has almost completed the test. The skin marking ceremony will come next. TK lives in a simple society. He probably doesn't wonder what type of grown-up he'll be or what type of person he is. But sometimes you may wonder what type of person you are. And like as not, you decide that you have a pretty well-rounded personality. All right, try this test. Think of 3 of your most prominent traits. Now, you may have thought, I'm happy, shy, and stubborn. You see, although you think of yourself as a whole person, you try to describe yourself in terms of bits and pieces. Now, the difficulty is in trying to measure those bits and pieces. Over the centuries, people have tried to measure the human personality in many ways. One was to compare personality type and body type. Poets and scientists thought the two were related. In the famous play Julius Caesar, Shakespeare said, "Let me have men about me that are fat, sleek-headed men, and such as sleep o' nights. Yon Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous." In those days, fat meant sociable and easygoing. Lean and hungry meant cold and calculating. But if you consider people you know of various shapes and personalities, you can readily understand that personality is far too complex to be related to physical shape. But modern society had a need to distinguish accurately between individuals, and for a very good reason. Some kind of test had to be attempted. And it began in a school. At the turn of the century, school enrollment was growing fast. In France, the government decided to make schooling more efficient by identifying slow learners and putting them in separate classes. In 1904, they asked a psychologist named Alfred Binet and a physician, Théophile Simon, to devise a test that would enable teachers to identify retarded children. Binet and Simon tested a large number of children of various ages. They thought that intelligence was a trait that is inherited, just as head size, eye color, and freckles. So at first, Binet had tried to determine intelligence from physical measures, like the size of a child's head. But he found little relationship between the two, and so he abandoned physical measurements. Instead, he devised a test of mental skills that attempted to measure memory, attention, and motor skills, for example. The result was the Binet-Simon test. Another psychologist put the Binet-Simon test score into an equation. The equation compares mental age and chronological age to give a score called intelligence quotient, or IQ. IQ isn't awesome, it's just a score on a test. The purpose of the original IQ test was to help teachers identify retarded children. But the test proved so good at predicting academic performance of all school children that it became part of the American educational system, as well as the French. And because the Binet-Simon test had been so successful, a psychologist at Stanford University, Dr. Louis Terman, adopted the test for American use in 1916. He called it the Stanford Binet Intelligence Test, and the latest revision is in use even today. And there are dozens of other IQ tests available. They go by many names and test a wide variety of abilities. And all kinds of people take them. Rich, poor, from the country, from the city, all economic and social levels. Adults, children, from every background. Binet and Simon thought the qualities they tested were inherited, permanent, and not subject to environmental influences. If Binet and Simon were right about intelligence being inherited, then from the day you're born, intelligence could not be improved or impaired any more than the freckles on your face could be changed. But studies have shown that many factors affect IQ scores. For instance, environment. The home you grow up in seems to make a difference. For example, children of low-income families generally have lower IQs than those who are reared in more affluent circumstances. And here's another example. In the 1930s, a researcher shocked many people when he reported that he had been able to increase the IQ scores of retarded orphans. He did this by taking them out of the dreary orphanage and giving them to retarded women to rear. Even though these women were themselves retarded, some of the children's scores rose to normal or above normal. Apparently, affection, stimulation, and love were enough to raise those scores. In contrast, almost all the children who remained in the orphanage and were tested as part of the experiment showed a decrease in intelligence scores. Recent studies continue to suggest that mothering can make a difference in IQ scores. Another influence on IQ scores is ethnic origin, which is often combined with economic and cultural influences. There's much evidence that a racial cultural bias is built into many test questions, a bias which favors the performance of white middle-class students, because the tests were written mainly by white middle-class educators. So IQ tests probably underestimate the intelligence of some racial and ethnic groups. The influence of environment on IQ scores starts at a very early age. The more colors, objects, toys, and play a child can experience, the better. The more sensations, touching, tasting, seeing, and most important, the more love and contact between a child and her parents, the higher the child's intelligence score will be. Environmental influence starts almost at birth. Recent studies suggest that the amount parents touch and talk with their child strongly influences the growing child's IQ score. Nevertheless, there are limits. We're born with limits. Not everyone can be an Einstein. But within those inherited limits, early stimulation appears to make a difference. Intelligence scores may also be influenced by being an only child or one of many. Research indicates that an only child or a firstborn child generally has a higher IQ than children born later, because only children and firstborn children receive more attention from adults. Social and economic environment, cultural and racial environment, birth order, and love all affect each person's IQ score. Let's take an example. A child is born into rural poverty. Hardly any books at home. He's not firstborn, but second. When he's 9, his mother dies, and his father remarries a woman who has 3 children of her own. Now he's part of what we call today a blended family. The family moves from place to place, and the young boy spends most of his time not in school, but in the fields as a laborer. He hasn't much chance for success in any academic field, and probably not a great chance for success in life in general. Well, that was Abraham Lincoln's childhood. If Honest Abe had taken an IQ test as a child, how well would he have done? Well, let's remember that intelligence is not just one score on a test. Human intelligence is too complex to be measured so easily. Among the things the IQ test doesn't measure is creativity. Most tests don't measure the ability to diagnose a problem, like why a car doesn't run. As a matter of fact, psychologists suggest that we may have as many as 150 types of different mental processes. An IQ test may measure only 5 or 6, just a few bits and pieces of the whole self. Whether the IQ test is valid is a thorny problem. We call a test valid if it measures only what it says it measures and nothing else. So does the IQ test measure overall intelligence, or does it only measure a few specific mental abilities? Or does it also reflect the environment of the person taking the test? 30 years ago, the Stanford Binet test included questions that seemed to require sophisticated vocabulary.
What grade are you in school?
Fifth.
Fifth grade. How do you like it?
I think it's nice.
You do? Amy, we want to do some different things here this morning. I have a number of things to show you. First of all, I want to find out how many words you know. Here they are. You listen, and when I say a word, you tell me what it means.
Only children growing up in a certain kind of home would know the meaning of some words. Words like juggler and peculiarity. And how would you define the word priceless?
Priceless?
Something that is very low in price. It doesn't have a price to it at all.
In this case, a child's very logical answer was still considered incorrect. Another form of bias is illustrated by the foolish picture test. This picture is open to many interpretations. The boy's answer probably reveals more about problems with the test question than about the boy's intelligence.
Let's look at this picture. What's foolish about that?
Because they're fighting.
Why is that foolish?
Because the cowboys are stealing the Indian land. That's what's silly about that.
Over the years, many of the problems in IQ tests have been corrected, and today's tests show a great effort at minimizing differences in environment among cultures and races. Vocabulary, for example, can be avoided, but controversy continues over the usefulness of the IQ test.
I'd like you each take one booklet and pass the rest back. Make sure that you have a number 2 pencil.
But some kind of intelligence test is given in every state of the Union each year to at least 10 million children of all ages. Some states give several tests each year. The score on a test, the number, will become part of their identity and can have enormous impact on their lives. A low score can label a child as dull. With a high IQ score, he's called bright or gifted. And a label can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. A low score could mean being channeled into a low-status vocation. A high score can open the door to a prestigious college and a high-income profession. And yet, an IQ score on a test doesn't allow for nervousness or illness and may not give credit for a very creative but incorrect answer. Educators note that the IQ test does predict how well a child will do in school, and that is valuable information. But then, is the test valid as a measure of overall intelligence? Or is it really only a predictor of academic performance? IQ scores have been used to predict success in more than grades in school. One thing we do know is that IQ doesn't stay the same through your whole life. It can change. In fact, studies show that people can be trained to be better problem solvers and to significantly raise their IQ scores. Becoming a better problem solver can help with other kinds of tests, not just IQ. Nobody makes it through life without being put to an occasional test. TK had to pass only one more formal test. His skin is marked for all the world to know that he's passed this test of manhood. He doesn't flinch or react to pain during the cutting. He knows that when the cuts heal, the scars will be tattoos, permanent proof of his status. Now he's eligible for marriage and to learn the laws of his tribe so he can sit in councils. His scars don't tell how good a leader or husband he'll be, nor indicate his intelligence or personality. They tell that only he, TK, passed the test of the hunt. There will be other proud moments and celebrations, but never again so important a test. Today, we live in a testing society. Millions of tests are available. There are personality tests for all ages and all purposes. Some personality tests are used for counseling, some for therapy, some for job placement. There are two main types of personality tests, objective and subjective. A subjective test asks questions for which there may be no single correct answer. The purpose of the test is to reveal someone's inner or subjective life. A test that presents someone with an ambiguous task, like describing an ink blot, is a projective test. And the chances are he'll project himself into the picture.
Two little L's facing one another. It's also the face of a grasshopper. It's pincers down here. It's clown faces. Nothing more.
Difficulty arises when we try to measure that subjective description with a number, a score. And these are still just bits and pieces of a whole personality. In contrast, objective tests of personality do not permit as much interpretation by the tester. In this test, the subject either agrees or disagrees with hundreds of short statements like these. Of what value are the answers on this test? Well, this subject probably has a normal personality. Someone with a psychiatric disorder might respond differently than this man does to certain questions. These tests help professionals diagnose psychiatric problems. So personality testing, both subjective and objective, can be useful. There are tests to measure almost any personality trait you can imagine. Honesty, loyalty, confidence, jealousy, courage. Frequently, we need to test these qualities as well as IQ. A student pilot who has a high IQ may get good grades at a military academy, but it doesn't follow that as a pilot, that person will have the ability to keep cool on a dangerous flight. Fortunately, there are tests that can help identify people who stay calm under most types of pressure. Tests can be helpful. There are all kinds, and they're here to stay. We need to continue working to make tests as fair as possible to people of all races and backgrounds. And we need to keep in mind that an individual's personality is too complex to be described in terms of body shape. Personality is also too complex to be measured by one score. In our society, testing's going to continue, but it's nothing to fear. It's nothing to fear because most tests can provide us with useful information, but they have to be administered correctly and interpreted correctly. But more important, what we may achieve in life will depend on far more than a few test scores. Abraham Lincoln said, "Always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any one thing."